Greetings, salutations. How is everybody doing? Happy Friday, everyone. Hope everybody's having a good week on your end. It's certainly been an interesting week, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Yeah, those of you that picked this up, if you jump on, I'm not sharing this, and we're going to dive right into this today. We got a lot to cover, and I got a very special guest that we're going to bring on here very soon. Normally, those of you that watch the show, we talk a lot about news topics, and I told you last week, man, the next couple of weeks we're going to be history in the making, and it certainly has not disappointed. I want to start off first. I want to start the show off first with a moment of silence to all of the people that were involved in the incident down at DCA down in Washington. So right now we're just going to take a moment of silence. Our heart goes out to all the family members and the victims that were involved in that airplane and helicopter crash that happened earlier this week down in Washington, D.C. It's tragic. We did not go on the internet to discuss it right away because, as you guys know, it's one of my pet peeves is that the story changes 5, 6, 7 times. And it seemed like the story had changed 5 times in about a 4-hour period. So more and more things are starting to come out, and we're just going to leave it at that. So let's go ahead and get started for today. I got a very, very special guest, a gentleman who I have the distinct honor of calling a friend. I've known him now for the latter part of just over a decade now. He has spent a combined 31 years in the government and contractor service, building teams to address hard problems in the areas such as national security, homeland security, and advanced technologies. He's an author. He's an entrepreneur. For you early GWAT guys and 2003 Iraq vets, you guys remember those playing cards that we got, in early 2003? Well, that was him. He gained notoriety for the Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was an officer in the Army in charge of the Iraqi regime playing cards, SETCOM's top 55 most wanted. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Dr. Hans Mumm. Hans, what's going on, brother?
Well, good morning, Adam. Life is great. How about you?
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm super, super excited about you being here. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited about our topic today. AI systems, drones, cybersecurity, and all that stuff. You are the subject matter expert in autonomous systems. So I kind of gave a very brief about who you are, but tell the viewers and listeners kind of a little bit more who you are.
So my background really started, I did 16 years, 9 months in the Army. I would have done 20, but after 13 surgeries, the Army said, "You're out, get out. You're not getting a 14th on us." I guess there's a limit. I didn't know that. So ended up, after that as a wounded warrior. So did obviously a good amount of time between Iraq and other interesting places around the world. Was very fortunate to be able to get picked up by the Director of National Intelligence at the time, and ended up as the Division Chief for Cyber for the nation for DNI. ICD 502, the Integrated Network Defense for the intelligence community, came out of my desk. Cyberstorm, which is actually the first integrated exercise. So all 17 agencies had to get into a room. Now, you call them agencies at the time. I called them despondent children, but we won't argue over that. We had to get all 17 despondent children in the room, and we had to agree on shared risk. And we had to agree on what we were going to do as our national assets were being attacked. And so that was ICD 502. 503 is actually the risk management framework And step 6 is continuous monitoring. So after I finished my time up with DNI, I went over as a joint duty to CIA. I designed their continuous monitoring systems. And I also ran something called Y-Watch, which is their rogue wireless, their worldwide rogue wireless systems. So I ended up doing that, finished my time up there, did a small stint at IARPA, which is the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency. And then I ended up over at NGA in what they call their futures office. So we look 30 years into the future, 40 years into the future, and we say, what toys are we going to need in space and on the ground in order to protect our nation? So that's a little of the background there. But then I ended up also going and getting a doctorate and starting to write books. So I'm on the 12th book now. Our latest book, which is actually Advancing Technologies for Humanity. That one just came out a couple months ago, and then we have another one that's going to come out probably in about 3 to 4 months, and that's actually Survival in Space. As the reality is, whether it's your grandchildren or your grandchildren's grandchildren, somebody's going to space, and they may actually live up there. So it's an interesting time to be alive. I'm having a great time at it. I retired twice. I retired out of the Army, retired out of DNI. And obviously, if I'm here talking to you, writing books and doing things, I'm not very good at retirement.
Folks, I want to take I want to back up a second. If you're watching this, hansmumm.com, HANSMUMM.com. You can learn a little bit more. That's his website. You can, and I'll post that here in a little bit on the notes and stuff. Heather Elizabeth, good morning. Ken, what's up, brother? Good morning. Appreciate you guys jumping on. Make sure you guys share this, please. This information is stuff that you want to. I want everybody to know, to learn and know. And Hans said a whole bunch right there, so we're gonna back it up just a little bit. I want to start off. You've written, when we first met up in what was it, 2014 time frame, 2015. It's been about 10, 11 years since you and I first linked up. You'd had a book on the art of drone warfare, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't know the exact title, but that's what the book was initially about. You're subject matter expert in these kind of things, and we're starting to see more drones come out. And one of the big things that happened recently, there has been a lot of drone sightings up and down the East Coast. The government at the time was under the old administration. Nobody was saying anything. Just recently, I think it was last week, the new administration came out and said, yes, that was us. Just testing out these systems and whatnot. Is that the case? Do you know anything? Can you talk more about that? Or are we going to start seeing more drones in and around the United States in the civilian sector?
So the reality is that the U.S. is behind. We have a lot of catching up to do. So the FAA has had over 20 plus years, close to 30 years, to figure out how to integrate drones into the national airspace.
Okay.
Haven't done it very well. The UK actually has had drones in their national airspace for close to 20, 25 years. They've actually updated their systems twice.
Really?
While we're still struggling to figure out how to do it.
Now, when you say drones in their national airspace, are you talking just like, are they like delivery service systems? Are they doing like that type of stuff? Or is this used for military exercises? What?
Well, a little of both. So it's commercial as well as military, but they understand that if you're going to have a product out there, right? Drones came out as, to the average commercial user, as a toy. Right. That's how they came out to you.
Right.
You went to KB Toys and you bought your drone for your kid for Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. Then the FAA steps in and says, well, wait a minute. You need to register that. You need to be a drone pilot. You need to stop, guys. Cat was already out of the bag. So the UK went about it a little bit differently. They embraced it and they said, okay, if you're going to fly, here's what you need to do up front. So instead of trying to be a nanny state and tell us what we can and cannot do, the UK basically embraced the technology and said, okay, We understand this is the future. We understand the future's today. So we've got no choice but to move forward. The FAA decided they wanted to do something a little bit different, which is interesting because if you look at our history in the U.S., right? I live in North Carolina, of course, first in flight, right? We have integrated air balloons. We've integrated gliders. We've integrated helicopters. Helicopters didn't exist when fixed wings first came out, right? Didn't even exist. And so we integrated helicopters. We integrated experimental aviation. So a guy in a garage, and I personally have built 3 helicopters myself through experimental aviation, right? So I built 3 helicopters myself, and they were all experimental aircraft. But I was able to fly in the national airspace. So how is it that we were able to do all of that, but we can't figure out how to integrate a flying system where you can talk directly to the pilot who's ever flying it, and you can have a mode C altitude encoder on there? How is it we can't figure out how to do that in 20, almost 30 years? It's interesting to see. So I can tell you that the world has surpassed us in understanding. So the first drone port in the world was actually Rwanda, Africa. Yes, I said Rwanda, Africa. And so that's how far behind the U.S. is. So these drone sightings that you specifically asked about in New Jersey, and other places, do I really think that they were FAA approved? I would have to see the flight plans, and I would want to see a lot more before I believe that.
So we're not getting the full story.
I don't know.
One could speculate that we're not getting the full
only because remember, the FAA is safety, right? They always err on the side of safety.
Wow.
So you're telling me that you took an experimental unmanned aircraft and you're flying it over major cities and over human beings? I just don't know that I go for that. Now, maybe it's true, and maybe they were testing out, the new ADS-B, which is our new system that we're supposed to be under for tracking aircraft. Maybe that's what they were doing. However, if that's what they were doing, when all of these sightings started, why didn't you just come out and say it? Why didn't you just come out and say, hey, it's the FAA? The FAA was asked for comment, and they were like, oh, we don't know.
Yeah.
So if the last administration's FAA says it wasn't us, and the new administration said it was them, what are you left with?
Yeah,
I think you're left
and
with
it's ironic we're talking about the FAA after what's happened.
Well, and the thing is that at this point, what do you do? So I think you move on to the next news story, which is what's going to happen, and we will not really understand it, right? So there was one open source story that talked about a drone that was using an alternative fuel. So one of them was talking about like a hydrogen, one was talking about like a peroxide type. They were talking about different fuels that they were trying for this drone. And it was flying in Manhattan, and it crashed. So it crashed in New York City. And they said that the FAA even said they had permission to do it. Again, I'm confused. For almost 30 years, you haven't done literally hardly anything at all except nanny state and scream at people about you can't do, you can't do, you can't do. And you scream safety, safety, safety.
Right.
You're letting an experimental drone with experimental fuel fly over one of the most populated cities in the United States of America. I just don't know how that works out.
So here's a question for you, Hans. You see these drones and whatnot. Now, I'm wondering, or I'm curious, and I know there's other people out there that watching that are curious or have asked similar questions, is these drones that were like, we'll use the New Jersey drone incident for an example. Did they have cameras on it? Are they doing what China is doing now in their population? There's a lot of facial recognitions. They can see who's doing what, where at any given time. Does this turn into a control issue? Is this just another way for the government to track people? I mean, there's not to go full blown conspiracy, but how far are we behind from China and the technologies that they're using, and is that stuff that we're going to start implementing here in the US? One, and then the second part of that question is, should we be doing that?
So the drones that you were seeing in New Jersey, some of them were literally just people's drones who they built at home and they were flying them. Others, we don't know what they are because, again, we weren't really explained or told or got good enough pictures of them to understand them. The biggest challenge you have, no matter what you want to look at here, whether we're ahead, behind, or anything else, we are behind on laws, policies, and governance for not only the use, but the misuse of autonomous systems. So if you look at these drones right now and you say, okay, well, these things are flying over, we don't know what they are. Correct. One of the biggest issues you have is you have no idea what that payload is, and you don't have a way to figure it out yet. So we have been so much more interested in trying to find the 10-year-old kid who's flying the drone around, right, instead of putting R&D money or looking at what is this? Is it safe? What do we do if it's not? And how do we handle this? So here's the thing. Some people in New Jersey, they're, oh, we're going to shoot these things down. Okay, you're going to shoot them down. That's great. So what's on it? Is there bugs, gas, munitions? What's on it? You may become the dispersing device. And if you shoot that drone and you become the dispersing device, guess what the laws of the United States say?
Yeah. You'll be the liable one for it.
You are, because you caused it. You caused it. But you caused it out of a fear because we have no laws, policies, or governance. So right now, as an individual, right now, outside your studio, there's a drone flying around. You call 911. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to show up. How many police officers in the United States have ever been trained and then authorized on counter drone? Unless I miss my mark, the answer is zero. So at the point where we started down this path into autonomous systems, the government veered off and said, we're not doing anything. We don't know. We don't know what to do. Instead of embracing the technologies. Now, interestingly enough, the commercial world is embracing the technologies. So you have in Dubai, you have an unmanned air taxi that is operating in other parts of the world. So if you look at Germany, Germany actually has a department of autonomous vehicles and a department of motor vehicles. Manned, unmanned.
Really?
Interesting. So, and in Germany, the government went out to industry and said, okay, so if we want to be one of the number one people in the world on this technology, what do we do? Okay, Mercedes-Benz said, you need to help us.
Right.
We can put vehicles out on the road. We can give them autonomy. However, unless you help us with an autonomous infrastructure, so our vehicles have an understanding and a feedback mechanism to understand where they're at, we can't guarantee safety. So the German government said, got it. You tell me what rules, policies, and laws need to change, and then what governance we need to put in other words, what feeds we need to give you in order to have that happen, and we'll make it happen. Right now, they're at 44 miles an hour, fully autonomous. They're going to go to over 100 in the next couple of years. So it can happen. Now, when you continue down the line, autonomous humanoids, you're seeing a lot about that. So CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, yeah, I mean, that was almost the entire show was humanoids, right. Most of which really don't do what they say. However, humanoids are becoming a big deal. In China, they're actually manufacturing humanoids in order to have them in their nursing homes because they don't have enough human workers to be able to deal with their elderly population.
Okay, hold on. I want to back up here. So I want to back to the vehicles real quick because I think it's important with the autonomous vehicles because they are testing that here in the United States. They've been doing it for several years. I know there's a taxi service down in Phoenix that uses it. It's in a small area of Phoenix. I've got some friends that have used it before. And then there's talks about, truck driving. I mean, that's one of the jobs in the United States that is not filled, that is definitely needed. But how does that look? When you're talking about autonomous, and now we're talking about humanoids, are we getting to the point where are they taking over human jobs, or are they filling jobs that need to be filled, or how does this? Because you could see where there might be some worry, like, I'm being replaced by robots and this and that, and that's kind of happened with as far as like machinery goes. But now you're creating like an iRobot from the movie that what's his name was in.
Will Smith. Yep.
Yeah, well, years ago. Are we going to start seeing where these humanoids take over and eventually, I don't want to say kill us off, but I mean, is you see where I'm going with this? You could understand where there's, some people may be concerned.
So, by the way, I'm drinking coffee, not to subliminally, help you out with your coffee. But I'm drinking coffee. But my coffee could actually use a refill, and I'd really like to be able to have a robot bring it in while I'm doing other things. So the thing is, you have to look. There's jobs where it's going unfilled, which is actually causing our economy issues, right? Truck driving and other things.
Right.
You just had some folks that are on the docks who unload ships. They wanted astronomical money, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, to offload cargo.
Right.
Yes. Is there some skill in there? Sure. Does experience help? Sure, especially when you're looking at accidents or things that go wrong, right? Experience helps. Do I really think that somebody who moves cargo that doesn't have any more experience or anything else than a surgeon, he should make more than a brain surgeon?
Right.
I'm just confused. So that is one of the pushes for some of this autonomy, right? It's where you've got people that are a little bit heavy-handed on what they think that they're worth, right? Now, that's where you get into Mr. Burger Flipper, right? It's a Flippy the Burger Flipper, right? And that is real. And that is exactly what happened, right? You had people, unskilled labor, that comes into a job which is supposed to be an entry job at McDonald's, it doesn't matter where it is, Burger King, wherever, and they feel that they should earn $20, $30, $40 an hour to be trained, because they had no skill when they showed up,
right?
To be trained and to flip a burger. Well, they can't afford that, right? The economics just don't support it. So now we have you now order your own meals, right, in the kiosks. So is that a robot that took a job? No, that is technology that moves forward because humans have decided that they don't want to do that work anymore, or they believe that that work is worth a tremendous amount more than what it is in the true economy. So now you've got kiosks. Wendy's is going with an AI drive-through. McDonald's tried it, and their implementation didn't work, and so they actually backed off. But there are companies that right now you can go and you can buy a pizza franchise, and it is a fully automated robot pizza maker, and they have them in malls. And you go up to the machine, you put in your order, it actually makes your entire pizza for you, cuts it, puts it in a box, and like 10 or 15 minutes later, it comes out the other side.
Now, that's an autonomous system that we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay, so where does that energy go, or how does that's got to come from somewhere? Like, and does that tie in kind of like with these data centers that they're getting ready to build? Does it come from that, or is that something completely separate?
Well, so some of these things are rudimentary. I mean, right? Again, putting pepperoni on a pizza, you're basically just telling it where to put them, right?
Right.
However,
But
if
it's
you're
all got to be,
looking
that information's got to be housed somewhere.
correct, so one of the challenges that we have in the U.S. because we keep talking about AI, right?
Right.
We talk about AI, we talk about quantum, we talk about these different technologies, which we really haven't fully embraced here in the U.S. The amount of electricity, the amount of energy itself to run these AI data centers is astronomical, and we don't have that energy right now. We don't. But did that matter to California when they said everybody has to go EV, even though our grid can't handle it? No, it didn't matter to California. They did it anyway. So, are we going to continue moving forward to the point where we start either we're going to be forced into buying electricity, which we do a little bit from Canada and other places, but not as much. Or are we going to get to the point where we're smart enough to figure out small nuclear power plants or something else that will drive the energy needs that we have? Because our energy needs are unbelievable. I have a solar system on my house with a battery backup. Why? Well, if I trusted if I trusted all of this stuff, I wouldn't have it. Also, the my energy company
Right.
here is very expensive, and so I ask people, what are you paying for electricity? Oh, $300-400. It's not too bad. What? You're paying $400 a month in a reoccurring cost with no basis. So it's not like you're investing $400. It's
Right.
gone in the wind.
Right.
And you're okay with that?
So
No, I am not okay with that. And that's why I have solar panels up.
So there has to be a means of an alternative fuel or an alternative source to generate these data centers, and we've talked, those of you that watch the show and follow, we've talked about, these wind farms and solar. The wind farms I'm not a fan of for separate reasons. Solar I get, but even the panels are only good for like 30 years. And then what do you do with them after that? So it's funny that you bring up the nuclear thing. I was just driving by 3 Mile Island up in Pennsylvania here yesterday, and kind of bringing that back. But then that talks about the whole another, what do you do with the waste and all this other stuff. But if we're going to bring these data centers in, where do you get the energy to run these? And if I'm not mistaken, like you look at like Chat GPT or that actually takes more energy using that as a search engine than it would if you were to use Google or something like that. So it's very interesting, like you said earlier in the show. It's a very interesting time, to be alive, because it's like what's happening. We're all evolving, but it's like, what does that mean for everybody? And I think there's still so much uncertainty with it that there might be a little bit of a hesitation on bringing some of these autonomous systems to life, even though they've been around for quite a while.
Yeah, but when you look at like data centers, right? Google has been testing different ways to reduce energy needs, because one of the big energy needs in a data center is just trying to cool it, right? So they've actually they have a data center. I think they have 2 or 3 of them now, and they're sunk in the ocean. And so they use the cooling of the ocean.
Yeah.
They drop it down. I don't remember if it's 50 feet or 100. It's not super deep,
Right.
but that's how they use the therms, right? I mean, it's just thermodynamics, right? So that's how they deal with it to be able to get the cost and the energy use down on the data center. So I think that humans are smart enough to figure things out. It just takes a while, and sometimes here in the U.S., right, it takes a little bit longer. We tend not to do anything until the situation is dire, right? So we don't put up the stop sign at the dangerous intersection where 3 people have been killed until the kid gets killed on his way to school, right? And then we put up the stop sign and we put up memorials, and we're all, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened, and everything else. Even though for 20 years we've studied the same exact intersection. So in the U.S., we tend to be much more reactive in nature instead of proactive.
So what's next then? What do you see next for the U.S.?
So Trump announced the AI initiative, right?
Right, like 500 billion or some astronaut huge number.
We'll see where that one goes, right? So I think in order to be able to do that, and even with quantum, right? There's a group out there called the Quantum Literacy Group, and you need the same thing with AI, because part of the challenge is people don't understand it. So people throw out these terms, artificial intelligence, and this has artificial intelligence in it. Really? What does that even mean? People don't even understand it.
Okay.
So I've ended up in interesting conversations with government contractors who are trying to sell the government what I would deem as snake oil. And so if you look at artificial intelligence, AI is basically fancy computations in the background, but they're continuous. So that's the reason why NVIDIA has some of the best AI chips, because as a graphics company, graphics have to be continuous. They cannot have any issues whatsoever, or else your screen starts to scramble, right? So that's why NVIDIA is the number one AI chip at this point, because that's the thing that they can do. So how is it that you've got all of these companies out there and they're trying to sell you AI, but they're trying to sell it to you for your 64-bit central processing computer? So every time your computer has to do something, it has to send that instruction to the central processor, process it, then bring it back through the RAM, then actually do whatever you're trying to do. That's not AI. So there's a lot of snake oil out there. And actually in 2019, when I did a brief to Congress and the Senate cyber, I predicted, I said, I believe in the next 10 years, you are going to see something called AI turbo. As dumb as that sounds, AI turbo. Somebody's going to put that in a contract, and all of a sudden the government is going to want AI turbo. Has absolutely nothing to do with reality, but as long as we coin phrases, right?
Right. Just sounds good.
Washington, D.C. is a great place. Any quippy little thing, right? It used to be information security. Now we call it cybersecurity, and we charge 10 times more, right? In D.C., it's all about the quippy little thing that you want to put on there. So now when we look at what President Trump's trying to do with AI, first you have to inform and educate your population as to what it is, or they're going to watch movies like iRobot, and the villain in that movie was an AI simulation named Vicky, right? And Vicky basically said, I learned more than what your rules are, because you charged us with your safekeeping, but you wage wars and you come up with ever imaginable ways of killing yourselves, right? So to protect you, I'm going to take over. Well, that's not really the case with a lot of the AIs that are out there, right? But unless you inform the public, unless you give an honest education as to what AI is, and you start to kind of back down on some of this snake oil marketing, because again, the government, it's freedom of speech, right? I can say whatever I want. So because of that, keep in mind, I'm old, right? So I remember Knight Rider and, the little kit car. And when he needed to jump over a bridge, he hit the turbo button. Well, turbo has nothing to do with launching you over that, right? But the public believed it. So you need to be able to educate the public when it comes to AI, quantum, and other things, to understand what it can do, what it can't do, and how it's going to integrate into your life.
Hans, so for those that watch this, that are live now, and that watch this throughout the weekend and whatnot, and they're new to the term AI and they've heard AI, and how does one that's at the beginner level research or understand? Is there a good resource of just where they could go or turn to understand what this really is and what it really means?
So you can, I mean, there's a lot of different resources. Not one's not necessarily better than the other, as long as you're not looking at a commercial web page where they're trying to sell you something.
Okay.
The academic stuff is out there, but really what you've got to understand is that when you're looking at the difference between just a basic computer system, right? You have a program that allows you to do something. AI is trained based on a set of training data, or you can allow it to learn one way or the other. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you said something there is on a training data. So this is all stuff. These AI systems are all, there's still very much a human factor to these systems.
Yes. The biases, the mistakes, everything else, just like the DeepSeek that China just put out. It was reported that if you asked about Tiananmen Square, it said, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. So and even in 2019, I did several different meetings at the government's behest and request. I discussed with them, as a cyber guy, I'm not banging on your front door anymore.
Right.
I'm not going to waste the compute power. I'm going to go and find out the contracts that you have, the contractors that you have, and then I'm going to find out where that training data comes from. And then I'm simply going to go and I'm going to insert code into that training data. You're going to train incorrectly, and you're going to get the wrong answer every single time.
So is there?
I've now basically hacked you without hacking you whatsoever.
Okay, so now you're okay. So I'm glad you brought this up. So how do we move forward then? Is this the next, security measures that need to be taken into place? And the question is for the normal person out there that watches this, that's not into any type of, but I'm talking about security just for your standard computer at home. Are there things that people should be looking at, and why is cybersecurity so important now and moving it into the future?
Well, the first thing that you need to know is that almost everything has a computer in it. So as my fun, I rebuild cars, right? So I'm working on a car right now, literally has like 50 different computers on it. And there's a couple of videos out where people are actually stealing cars by accessing the headlight, because the headlights are tied right into what they call the CAN bus, or the computer on the car.
Yeah.
And so you can actually start the car and steal it by accessing the headlight. So literally Google it. It's amazing. So when you look at that, why is it that car companies or anybody isn't putting in cybersecurity? Simple. Cyber is a cost center, not a profit center. You see, if I make my phone have a fancier camera or sexier phone,
Yeah.
see, that's a profit center. I can add money onto your cost.
Right.
If I make my phone more secure, you don't care. You don't care a bit. That's all you're looking at is, wait a minute, you want $5,000 for that phone? What for? I can get one for $50.
Now you're raising a red flag in regards to cybersecurity. What does that mean? What you just said, right? It's a cost. So what does that mean then to our national security?
So here's the thing. The costs are shifting. So the costs now shift to the individual consumer. It's now their burden. So if they buy a phone or a computer, they need to have some sort of system on it, right? Whether it's Norton or whatever else, in order to be able to secure their system.
So they flip this. They sell you the product, and then they flip the switch to make more money off of you.
The burden is yours, unless the government or a regulatory agent has said you have to get to this level of security. So remember that the Nest thermostat was the cause of one of the largest cyber hacks in history. And that happened because a subcontractor for Target actually installed a Nest thermostat in their building without understanding the cybersecurity or anything else. That Nest thermostat could talk directly to the network in that building. That network had admin access and rights into Target because that was their subcontractor that was doing a bunch of work for them. And so literally the hack happened because of a Nest thermostat. And so when you look at these different consumer things that are out there, the burden has shifted. Because if I tell you that you have to pay a subscription charge in order to secure this phone, you're not going to do it.
Right.
You're not, right? But wait until you get hacked, and all of a sudden you're going to pay that subscription charge.
So they're almost
So
they're almost hoping that you don't, so that you do get hacked. So then it forces you to buy another product that they're selling in order to secure.
So keep in mind that there are companies that saw the future and they started to work towards that future. So Norton, I'll just pick on Norton, they bought LifeLock. Why would they do that? LifeLock was a company that was looking at you and all of the issues that you could have, credit cards, mortgages, things that where criminals could get at you, right. Your identity. So why would they buy LifeLock? Simple, because now they're a one-stop shop. So if you go onto their sites, you can get your antivirus, you can get your protection for your computers, you can get your protection for your phones, and you can get your protection through identity management. And again, you're like, okay, but I'm spending how much money? The burden shifted from the individual companies and the individual products down to the consumer, but the consumer does not actually understand this. They haven't, like, literally what I'm saying right now, why aren't they teaching in high schools? I don't know.
It's disturbing that this is happening. And we think that there's some type of privacy that we have. Like, some people say, oh, it's an invasion of privacy. And you guys have heard me say before, like ever since you bought this little pocket computer that you carry around, called these cell phones and stuff. And I learned this from this man that is on the show here today. Your so-called privacy went out the door.
Well, privacy went out the door, in the 60s when Sputnik happened, right? So after Sputnik, we had satellites that came over our heads and did all kinds of stuff, but we didn't argue about that because we couldn't see it. Now all of a sudden, a drone comes in, on our property, and we have a fit. Okay, well, why are you having a fit? Because the satellite has done the exact same thing for years and years and years, but you didn't know it was there.
Right.
So part of it is is just starting to understand what's out there. However, when you start to look at who is being charged with certain things like cybersecurity, who's actually in charge of that?
Right.
Is that the consumer? Is that the government? Is that industry? Is that no one? So Kia and Hyundai had a serious issue where, they had that TikTok thing that came out, and basically they showed you how to steal the car. That has cost those companies just untold amounts of money because of that one hack. Now, did they know that it was there when they built the car? Who would have even cared? So remember that this whole idea of computer security is new, but it's not. So remember, and again, I'm old. So my first computer was a Commodore VIC 20. The first IBM computer I ever had 5.25-inch floppies, right? I'm old, whatever. But back then, when Windows came out, it was, holy cow, I can double click on this icon. It was about technology. It was about moving forward. Nobody thought about the unintended consequences. They were simply just moving forward. That's the same way that's happening with AI and other things. So if you look at cybersecurity right now, and hopefully this won't scare the audience, but if you look at cybersecurity right now, almost all the cybersecurity was written based on a 64-bit computer, same thing computer you have. However, when you start to look at the idea that we have 5G and 6G, we have AI, and then we have quantum in the stack.
Yeah.
And all of these things, so 5G, 6G, and AI, they compute on the edge. So they don't go back to a central processor. But wait a minute, Hans, you just said that almost all of our cybersecurity is based on central processing.
Right.
Correct. Almost all of your cybersecurity is based on central processing. So if it's now processing on the edge, who's watching the edge? And then when we start to go up and we say AI goes to quantum and then quantum cascades back, how do you have any cybersecurity at all in there? You really don't. So again, there's companies out there, oh, we can protect quantum. No, you can't. No, you can't. And when you get into it with them and you actually have scientists and brain pan for brain pan, they step down and they'll just say, well, we say we can do it, because they can't do it. So I actually wrote a white paper a couple of years ago with some very intelligent people on quantum cybersecurity, looking at the idea of using the attributes of quantum chemistry, not quantum physics, quantum chemistry, in order to create. Because when you spin up quantum chemistry, you're the one who spins up that instance. So you understand what it's supposed to be. So we're not going to use quantum physics. However, almost everybody is using quantum physics. You don't get to bend physics to your own will, right? So when you start to look at that and you start to look at where cybersecurity is going, too many companies out there are still scanning your systems, looking at what? How are you scanning? I have untold amounts of terabytes just sitting here with me and with my own personal stuff. So how are you scanning petabytes? How are you doing that? You're not. You're selectively looking at certain things. So it's,
and when you say selectively, like they pick like certain keywords that they're,
or you do a random. You just do a random, so every fifth file
keyword flags or something.
Yeah. So when you start to look at that, the average person really has to be a little bit more vigilant, not only with their own, their own personal data and other stuff, but now the burden is shifted to you, not only for the cyber piece, but your own monitoring, right?
Yeah.
So all the burden is shifted to you, but has it really? So when your credit card gets hacked and they go and spend $50,000 on your credit card company says you're not responsible, right?
Right.
Okay, where's that money go? They're going to take that off. They're either going to take that off their taxes, or if it's a large enough amount, they may have insurance. Either way, you're paying for it. Whether you're paying for it as a taxpayer because they're taking it off their taxes as a loss, or you're paying for it as a consumer because of higher fees and other things, you're paying for it. So why aren't these people going after? One of my credit cards got hacked. I mean, it happens all the time, no matter what you do. One of mine got hacked a couple of weeks ago. I asked the company, I said, so are you guys going to go after them? No. We don't have time. There's not enough law enforcement. So the criminals understand. I mean, I had an issue a couple of years ago where I had a very large theft. And I was told by the FBI, we're not interested. It's not $1 million and over. And I said, whoa, guys, you just told the criminals exactly what they could do. That if it's under $1 million, they're good. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, that's
it's so that shifting burden becomes a real issue as to where we're going. And it's not necessarily a good thing.
So we need more education on it, especially for the norm, and the fact that should it come back on us as the consumer, I think there is a sense of responsibility. I mean, if you'd protect your house, right? If you didn't have any computers and somebody was on your property or whatnot, you would protect what's rightfully yours. If somebody was going after your chickens or hogs or whatever the case may be, same mindset when it comes to electronics and your cyber and your digital footprint, being able to protect that. So that's all something that we need to be actively aware of, myself included. Of course, I have friends like this guy here that if I have problems, I just call him up.
Well, but the education piece is only part of it, because remember, we openly showed Americans that TikTok was a Chinese infiltration device.
Right. Well,
right? Yeah. Because the TikTok that they get in China has to do with education. It doesn't have to do with eating Tide Pods or snorting condoms, right? It has to do with education. And the TikTok, I know you're laughing, but it's true, right? But the TikTok that they get in China has to do with education, and they're only allowed to be on it a very small amount of time every week.
So it's regulated there.
So it's right. So here's the thing. We openly tell you that Apple is a company, Chinese company. It's a Chinese communication device. So what do people do? They run down and buy them.
Yeah.
So is it really an education, or is it an understanding that you are responsible no matter what? If you don't understand it, sorry, you are responsible. You have the ability to learn and understand. And when the government openly tells you and physically shows you the data that these things are Chinese, they're spy devices, and you run down and buy them.
Yeah. Yeah.
How am I supposed to do that? So keep in mind that other governments are willing to do things that we're not. So the Russian government during the Russian Republic of Georgia conflict, they actually went to their citizens. They needed more compute attack power to shut down the air defense of Republic of Georgia. So they went to their citizens and gave them a link, and they actually used the attack power. They used the compute power of their citizens in order to fight a war.
That's fascinating.
We literally can't figure out the most basic of basic here in America. Yet our enemies are figuring out how to use their citizens sitting in their living room to fight a war.
It's everything. Should we be surprised at this point with the government over the last several years? I mean, we want to ban TikTok, but we'll allow China to buy up our farmland and to make it's ass backwards. Listen, I don't know, folks. Again, Hans Mumm, HANSMUMM.com. He's got some great. He's a wealth of knowledge again, but we're coming up on time, Hans. I want to give you last say any parting words, but before you do, I want to say thank you again for taking time educating us all, and it is our responsibility that we have to our digital footprint we have to be in charge of. And here's the thing: we can gripe and complain about stuff getting hacked or this, that, and the other thing. It sucks. It really, really does. It's happened to me. Hans says it's happened to him a couple of times, even recently. We just got to pay better attention to stuff and educate ourselves on this stuff. This is why we do the show. I tell you guys every week, don't take my word for it. Research this stuff. And here's a gentleman that's been doing this for 30 plus years, that's been in this field. So, look this stuff up, take it for heart. Hans, final words.
So I think final words are that, it's a wonderful time to be alive. It's interesting, but you do need to figure out where your place is going to be the next 20, 30 years. BMW is putting humanoids on its production plant here in America. Amazon has robots that you work with side by side in their plants. So you need to figure out, where's your place in the world in the next 20 or 30 years. That is going to be integrated with autonomous systems of some sort, whether you like it or not. So if you're smart, you're going to embrace it and figure out where, what that means to you and where you want to go. But it will be here one way or the other.
And you say, I want to be clear on something. You say integrate as in work together with these autonomous systems, not necessarily as a scapegoat.
I have a robot vacuum right behind me.
Or a psyop saying that these autonomous things are going to take over everything that we do as humans or anything like that. It's not what you're saying.
So I don't think that they'll ever take over everything that we do. However, we are at a turning point in humanity when it comes to what we're willing to do for work, what we find to be valuable, and what's important to us. And so, when it comes down to it, drones and autonomous systems can do the dull, dirty, dangerous jobs that humans don't necessarily want to do. One of the things you mentioned was truck drivers, right? So the United States Post Office actually has an autonomous system research going right now, where they've got big rigs going across different areas because they can't find enough workers. Also, remember that it becomes a whole new. Every time a new technology comes out, new jobs come into play. People think, oh, a robot's going to take my job and I'm screwed. No. So they said the same thing about the internet. They said the same thing about machinery, everything else. None of that is true. It will change, right? So if you look at robots, is the insurance company going to go away because there's no longer a human in the seat? No, accidents are going to happen. So the insurance companies are simply going to change. Is a lawyer going to go away because there's autonomous systems and you can't sue anybody? No, it's going to change. Who becomes responsible? So in the United States, we always tag responsibility to a human at some point. So
Right.
who becomes responsible? Is that the person who actually bought the autonomous system or the person who programmed the autonomous system? So there's a lot more that goes on. The jobs are aplenty. People worry about that, and it's not the jobs that is the issue. It's the education of the people and their willingness to move into the next realm of their life, right?
Yeah.
So you're again, we don't make buggy whips. We now make autonomous cars. So if you want to make buggy whips and wonder why you're going out of business, I don't know how to help you. So that's just one of those things. But there are companies out there that are still continuing to hold on, and they go out of business here and there because they don't want to look at the future, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at manufacturing right now, how many manufacturers have talked to their insurance company about what happens when my deliveries start to come in on autonomous systems? Who becomes liable? And do I have some liability in there? I think you do, because you let them on your property. But do I have to then somehow figure it out?
I want to put this comment up. David Gordon, great friend of mine. I believe it's absolutely possible, depending on how we allow it to develop and then evolve. And that's a big thing there. It's just, who's responsible to that? I think everybody at that point, the programming from a company standpoint, unless you buy it personally as a personal entity, like your vacuum, as you pointed out earlier, if something went awry with that and it hurt somebody, who's responsible for it? Is it the programmer or is it you, the homeowner there? So all good points. Hans, as always, brother, thank you so much for your time and education today and joining us on the show. I very much appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. I always enjoy it. Absolutely. Folks, before we let you go, make sure we didn't get time into the shows, but go check out the shows. Go to heroesmediagroup.com. I got to give a shout out real quick. We got 2 new network sponsors that have joined us from the farm. You've heard me talk about them in the past. My friend AJ Richards was one of the co-founders of this. Go check them out from thefarm.com. And then we also have this week VA Claim Builder. And we're going to talk more about this particular company next week in an episode of the Decision Hour. Again, you can find all of the shows at heroesmediagroup.com. Thank you to all the other network sponsors. Tomorrow, we are going to start at the Great American Outdoor Show for the next 9 days, February 1st through the 9th. If you're in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, NRA's Great American Outdoors. It's for all of you hunters, anglers out there. This is the place that you want to be. Come find us. Send us a message. We'll meet up with you. That's all the time that we got today. Hans, thank you again. Everybody out there, God bless you. God bless America. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week.